Okay.
Awesome. Sorry about that, guys.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm Jordan with the Clean Water Initiative Program, and I'm joined today by Ashley from the Water Infrastructure Financing Program, and she's here today presenting on the Water Infrastructure Sponsorship Program, and that is a new funding mechanism for natural resources restoration projects. For those online, if you're having any technical difficulties, just send an instant message through Skype, and I'll field those inquiries. And if anyone has any questions through Skype, just type them in the Skype instant message. For questions, if you could ask clarifying questions, you can ask them during, but anything outside the scope of the presentation, save till the end. And I am sending a SurveyMonkey link in the chat, and I'll send it to everyone else after the presentation if you guys wouldn't mind filling that out to give us some feedback. There's a sign-in sheet going around, and I think that's it. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So as Jordan said, I'm Ashley Lucht. I principally am the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund project lead, but also now do WISPr. So I also want to let folks know that what you may have heard about WISPr 3, 4, 5, 2 weeks ago, months ago, and then even 2 weeks ago, it's probably changed. This program, being a brand new program, is ever evolving. So throw out everything you knew about WISPr and stay tuned for the next hour, and we'll go through all the updates to date. So just kind of a brief overview of what the State Revolving Fund is. So WISPr is kind of it's a subset of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, in addition to its counterpart on the drinking water side, is made up of federal money, state money, revolving funds, and investment interest. And so we have sources coming from all places into our funding programs. We get annual appropriations from EPA. It's matched at 20% from the state. And it's at the point now where most of the revolving funds are actually exceeding the annual EPA appropriations annually. So, and then investment income is actually a significant source of revenue as well. The Clean Water SRF has been around for about 30 years, and the Drinking Water SRF has been around for about 20 years. What is WISPr, the Water Infrastructure Sponsorship Program? Like I said, it's a subsidiary of the Clean Water SRF. In the last legislative session, Act 185 was passed, and Act 185 did three things. It expanded eligibility of clean water funded projects, so basically like all projects that address clean water can be funded through the Clean Water SRF. It made it so we can fund to private entities, whether they be for-profit or non-profit. And it also created this sponsorship world where essentially we could partner with municipal systems to help pay for natural resource projects at basically no cost for the natural resource project. So WISPr is a combination, it's a pairing of traditional Clean Water SRF projects with natural resource projects that are implemented by either a municipality or a private nonprofit entity. The sponsorer can only be a municipality, okay? And essentially at the end of the day, it's going to be one loan for both the sponsored project and the implemented project or natural resource project. This slide is just the 30,000-foot view. I'm going to get into it a little bit more. So like we said, sponsoring projects are traditional clean water SRF projects. So they are pipe replacement, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, they are stormwater projects, things that are, as my boss would say, the bread and butter of our program. So just so you know, Teresa Thomas was the one who is the mastermind behind all of this when she went to the legislature last year and introduced Act 185, and she shepherded it through the legislature. kind of got things off the ground and brought me on board just because she has other things to do. So I am picking up where she really had the brains behind this program. So these are the sponsoring projects, and then what can be sponsored. So what can be sponsored are essentially what you see on the screen. And they are, generally speaking, from the Ecosystem Restoration Programs Grants Manual. I'm not going to try to remember which section it is, but it is a subsection of eligibility of natural resource projects in there. And it's a very clearly defined type of projects. What is not eligible under WISPr is stormwater. So under the Ecosystem Restoration Programs grants, stormwater is eligible. Stormwater is not eligible under WISPr. But essentially, at a bottom line, if if ERP can fund it, WISPr can fund it. So how does it work?
I'm sorry, did you say if ERP can fund it, WISPr can fund it?
Yep.
Except for stormwater?
Except for stormwater, yes.
And that's including green stormwater?
Any kind of stormwater. Yeah, that was actually written into Act 185. Act 185 said no stormwater, mostly because they didn't want all of this money to go to stormwater projects, because there's so much stormwater need that it would really overshadow all of the other really water quality beneficial projects that existed. So that's why the legislature was like, nope, no stormwater. So how does it work? So those of you who were involved with WISPr a month ago or 6 months ago would remember that we were requiring a separate application in order to be WISPr eligible, but we decided that there's already a process in place that ERP does very well, and we said we are just going to jump on their bandwagon. So now all projects that want to be WISPr eligible need to go through ERP for their evaluation. So ERP has grant applications 3 times a year, and we will be working with them to align our needs. ERP is a state program, and WISPr is functionally a federal program, so we need to kind of work that out. But the next ERP grant cycle isn't until the end of August, I believe. September. Mm-hmm. So we have some time to get that figured out. But essentially, in order to be considered for WISPr, the project has to be vetted through ERP. And when I say vetted, that's different than being funded through ERP. As I think those who have applied to ERP know that for the most part they have enough money to fund all of the projects that they have, but sometimes they don't. And so there are projects that get evaluated on their technical merit, permittability, et cetera, its water quality benefit, et cetera, but then maybe don't get funded. Essentially, WISPr will be working with ERP to make sure that everybody can get funded. So ERP is a kind of another, it's another funding source available for those projects that can't be ERP funded. So projects that complete, ERP projects that complete either preliminary or design are automatically added to what WISPr considers the hopper list. So that's the world of projects that are in planning. So they are viable projects, they are permittable, they have a good water quality benefit, and so they are kind of on the radar. Those who had been involved in WISPr many months ago remember this concept of there's the hopper list and then there's the match ready list, and essentially the hopper list is anybody who who could get money through ERP or WISPr for planning and design. Okay. So once the natural resource project is match ready, a municipality will be identified for matching. So what this means is that I know many months ago the natural resource, the nonprofit folks were like, "Are we going to have to be calling municipalities and make playing matchmaker?" And I'm like, and we've said no. That's not what we're expecting from you. Essentially, we and my counterpart Tom Brown on the Clean Water SRF, who's in the back corner for those of you in the room, will be working with municipalities based on what their project schedule is. Because this is a really important component of WISPr, is that, and I think I get to it a little bit later in the presentation, but project timeline is vitally important. The WISPr project has to complete within a year of the municipal's project completing. And it doesn't have to start at the same time, it just has to finish within a year. Also, some changes to WISPr is the project actually doesn't need to be identified when we issue the municipality's loan. All we need to know is that the municipality is willing to participate in sponsorship. And essentially what Tom's going to then do is he's going to write a loan for 110% of what they asked for. Because that municipality saying that they are willing to sponsor can sponsor up to 10% of their loan value. So we're just going to say, all right, well, we're going to make an obligation, we're going to make an approval to you for 110%. And then this WISPr project can develop on its own. And we can work through these steps. For those of you on the phone, I'm using my hands to say, over to my right, this project is working independently of the municipal project over on my left. It's very exciting. So no longer does this have to be this very rigid identification of a project before we start the loan application. No longer is there going to be this combined priority list application. No longer are these additional priority points provided. We're trying to make it as easy as we can, frankly, for the municipality, because we want them to participate. So many of the changes that we're proposing are really to help the municipality, encourage them to participate. And so because we're going to be separating out the municipal project from the natural resource project, in situations where the natural resource project is sponsored by a private nonprofit, that nonprofit is actually going to get their own loan, and they are going to be working through through all the disbursements and project development kind of separate from the municipality's loan. And what this does is it separates the municipality's responsibility for processing invoices and paying contractors and things like that. So now the nonprofit's loan is going to sit over here in their own loan world, and then when that project is completed, all the disbursements made, the project signed off as done, those project costs are then going to be rolled into the municipality's loan. And we've already approved costs for the municipality, and so it's just going to be a very simple transfer of funds. And then, okay, I think I'm on to the next slide. Yep. And then what we'll end up doing is when the municipal project is done and the natural resource project has been rolled over, we will adjust the loan rate, the administrative fee that the municipality pays. We will reduce that to a percentage point equal over the life of the loan to pay off the natural resource project. Also, as an added incentive to municipalities who want to participate, we are providing the municipality with an additional 0.1% administrative fee reduction on top of the fee reduction that they would get for the natural resource project. Those of you who have been with us from the beginning remember that we were proposing to give additional priority points for these natural resource projects, and then those additional priority points could add more points to the municipality's project, and it would get re-ranked, and those priority points equaled additional grant funding, and it got to be a management nightmare for us. Again, because we'd have to identify the sponsored project at the very beginning, and it just, like, well, what happens if the sponsored project didn't go through? Like, do we take grant money away? So we said, no. We're going to just give the we're proposing to give municipalities an additional 0.1% administrative fee reduction. So I should say that some of these changes, they're being proposed in the federal fiscal year 19 intended use plan that is out for public comment right now. We're having a public hearing on the intended use plan on May 1st. There is a Skype option available. It's also going to be held at the annex in Berlin from, I think right now, 10 to 12. We may shift that 9:30 to 12. But again, there's a Skype option available, and this is where we'll be talking in a room full of, hopefully, people about the proposed changes, but you are certainly welcome to comment on them. Yay, nay, great, thumbs up, thumbs down, other options between now and then. Also, something that we kind of determined for WISPr, and I think that this has significant implications for other co-funding of these WISPr projects, is that these WISPr projects are non-federal money. And so there are some projects out there that I think are looking for other matching, and the match there may be getting Army Corps of Engineer money or some other type of federal money, but the match has to be non-federal. And WISPr can be a non-federal match, or is a non-federal match. This is also really important because it means that many of the federal crosscutters that apply to our federal dollars do not apply to WISPr projects. I guess one of the biggest ones would be qualifications-based selection. That's the biggest federal crosscutter. Also, I know we've talked over the months about whether these projects are going to have to go through an environmental review. We have determined that natural resource projects qualify under our treatment works policy as non-treatment works, and that they are non-treatment works. They are not required to do all sorts of federal crosscutters, including an environmental report, and that is huge for a lot of these projects. I think the only federal crosscutter that still applies is disadvantaged business enterprise, and even DBE for us is a goal. It's not a requirement. So really, it's really come along, like these changes that we're proposing are supposed to make these projects really, there's no reason why we can't do these. And there's no reason why municipalities shouldn't participate in WISPr. Yes. I feel like I've missed some like really big things about WISPr, so I just want to make sure. So WISPr is, and maybe because I've talked about it so many times I forget like the minutia of this, like, okay, well, WISPr is paired with a municipality at a 10-to-1 ratio. So if a municipality takes out a clean water SRF loan for $1 million, it can sponsor up to $100,000 in natural resource projects. Okay? A municipality can sponsor their own project, or they can sponsor a nonprofit's project. Okay? The project that is sponsoring does not have to be owned by the nonprofit. The nonprofit just has to have control, easement, or some agreement, except in the case of dams, because that's being completely removed, so there's nothing to own or control there. The nonprofit would just have to be the, quote, implementer of that project.
Actually, does the sponsored project have to be in the municipality for which?
That is an excellent question. So no, for a WISPr project to be sponsored by a municipality, it does not have to have any geographic connection. So Montpelier could sponsor a project in the Northeast Kingdom or it can sponsor a project in Montpelier. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is whether they're willing to participate, the timeline fits, and they have enough money. So the other thing I also wanted to make mention of is, and I know we mention this frequently, is the case of Burlington. So Burlington, for example, passed like a $30 million bond last year, and but they're not going to come to the CWSRF for $30 million all at once. They're going to come to us for $2 million here, $5 million there, $6 million there. The sponsorship component relates to the loan that is being applied for by into the CWSRF program. Okay, so if Burlington chooses to self-fund some of their own projects, they're not WISPr eligible. If they choose to use another funding source, like Vermont Municipal Bond Bank or the Rural Development, USDA Rural Development, they're not WISPr eligible. It's only a 10-to-1 ratio on the CWSRF loan that they're applying for. Okay, what'd you say?
Bond vote?
Yeah, I mean, the project has to be eligible to apply for the CWSRF, and so in order to apply, the municipality has to have a number of, quote, readiness to proceed criteria. That includes things like facility plan approval, design approval, bond vote. They have to actually apply. So yes, there are the readiness to proceed criteria they have to meet. I'm going to go on to the next concept. And Jordan, do we have any questions that have come through?
Nope, none so far.
Well, hopefully everybody can hear, and they're not just watching the slides. Okay, so the next big concept that our supervisor Teresa has come up with is this concept of what's called interim financing. So we are proposing off of the federal fiscal year 19 priority list to put aside $20 million of project funds, to $10 million for nonprofits and $10 million for municipalities, that would provide essentially immediate access to capital. So a nonprofit can purchase land, conservation easements, or buy or implement a large-scale project that it's kind of on a scale larger than, for example, ecosystem restoration program could have immediate funding for. So we're talking a couple, like $1, $2, $3 million projects that immediate access to capital for that person, for that entity selling property is really important. They don't want to wait 2 years for all of the funding pieces to come together. They're like, I want to sell now, or else I'm going to sell it to developer X. And obviously, we want to take on the. We want to make sure that stays in permanent protection. So the concept of this interim financing would be, okay, we give the nonprofits, say Vermont Land Trust or River Conservancy or any of those nonprofits, we give them this loan, this interim finance, and we give them $5 million to conserve a huge farm. And they close on the loan on September 1st of this year, September 1st of 2000 and whatever year we're in, 19 right now. Their first loan payment would be September 1st, 2020. But their payment would be at a very, very small amount. So a nonprofit, it would be about 1% of the loan value, and a municipality would just be like, you don't have to pay us. That would happen for 4 years. On the 5th year, there would be a balloon payment. So essentially, the balance of the loan would be due at the end of the 5th year mark, really 6 years after the start of the project, because you have a year grace period and then 5 years of payments. Now, because the CWSRFs do not penalize you for early payment, this allows the nonprofit, in the case of the nonprofits, to piece together all of those funding sources. So maybe they get ERP money for $250,000 1 year. Okay, so then they're going to send us a big big check, like the big ones. For those of you on the phone, it's the big lottery checks is what they're going to send us. Or they're going to get funding from Forest Service, or, there are so many funding sources out there. But essentially, by the end of year 5, you either have all of your ducks in a row, or you pay it off. Now, it might be scary, but from what we've talked to nonprofits, is they're like, that's a really good amount of time. We can get our ducks in a row in 5 or 6 years, no problem. Now, on the municipal side, is there a question?
Yep. Robert Fitch asked, is there an interest administrative fee charged on interim financing for either privates or municipalities? So 1% admin fee for privates and 0% for municipalities. Municipalities also have the potential for forgiveness. I think we're still working out a lot of the details on this, but, or I should say subsidy. What do you guys call it? Additional subsidy. Okay. So the CWSRF has a pot of money that they have to give away every year, and by give away, I mean not pay it back. In the nonprofit world, that's grant. We don't. On the SRF side, we don't work in grants. We work in loans and principal forgiveness through subsidy. So the CWSRF is proposing to take a chunk of that subsidy and kind of targeting it at these municipal interim financing projects, and especially at ones that have a super duper water quality benefit, and that is the technical term. So when the super duper water quality benefit is identified, the kind of prorated portion of that interim financing could be forgiven at 100%. So if a municipality takes out a $2 million loan to buy a forest, to buy a state forest plot of land, and there's 25% of that area has a super duper water quality, 25% potentially of that municipal interim financing loan is just poof, gone. It's just forgiven. They never have to pay it back. And then the rest of it, they piece together all the other sources of funding for it. Yep.
Not available to the nonprofits.
So the forgiveness is not available to nonprofits, and it's because statutorily we can't forgive private entities. It's just legislature said nope, no free lunch for the nonprofits. But you can get the grants from the other places to pay it off. Okay, and the benefit of sort of putting aside this money is we've identified this $20 million on our project priority list kind of at the bottom. And we're like, all right, well, we're going to fund all of the other projects, and we still have money left over for this, which is great. And what that also means is these interim financed projects don't need to compete with anybody else on the list. We've already reserved the money for them. Okay? Now, there are some details that I'm not going to bore you with, but it's, the money is available, first come, first serve, only so many privates can get the money, if we run out of capacity before, from the other folks that get subsidy, then it might not be available to you, asterisk, 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 so, And so this is still a developing policy and developing idea. It also is presented in the intended use plan. So if anybody has comments on that, we certainly welcome them during the public comment period. And I think that's really all I had to talk about. I know when I've done these presentations at other places, there are a lot of questions. So,
we have another question online.
Sure.
Yeah. Stacy Pomeroy asked, do the projects that get funded with the interim 20 million funds have have to go through the ERP process?
Yes.
So basically, all projects vetted through ERP become eligible to go forward.
Yes, and I also want to. So I am learning about ERP like every day. So ERP people who are in the room, please correct me if I am wrong. But ERP only evaluates certain projects. There are a number of projects that go under the block grant, which are like conservation easements that aren't evaluated by ERP, but they are eligible for WISPr. So this is over the next couple months we're going to have to like figure out how we vet the projects. Like the world of WISPr has to be we need to figure that out. But
that is absolutely correct. So
okay.
The ERP funds actually got siphoned to create block grants to make the grant process cleaner and smoother.
Yep.
But it is the same funding source, so
Yep.
you're right. All of the block grants and in the ERP block grants and the ERP grant rounds are projects that fall under your umbrella.
Yes, they are. It's just whether they're right. Except stormwater. It's just whether they're vetted. Excuse me. It's just whether the conservation easements are vetted for their, because we all want to count the beans. Like we all want to take credit for this stuff, and so this is the challenge with the difference. So this is why we have to vet them, is because under federal rule for the CWSRF, federal and state, I think it's actually more state rule, in order for us, meaning the CWSRF, to release funds, is a project has to get preliminary engineering approval and design approval. And so we were like, well, how are we going to get this approval on projects that are like just like a conservation easement? Like, what is that? And so we got with ERP and realized that they are already doing kind of some sort of determination of the equivalent of a preliminary engineering and final design. Now, obviously, on a conservation easement, what does that really look like? And so that's why we were like, ERP does this. And so by saying that ERP does this, we, in our minds, have satisfied our statutory requirements to not release funds without those approvals.
So the direction the block grants are going in is to include more requirements on the vendor that oversees the block grant to assure exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that all of those mechanisms are already in place, and where they're not, the idea is that the DEC technical project manager working with that will assure it.
Yes.
So I think you're probably safe. But
Yeah, and this
a little possible crack things
Right.
to fill through.
And again, this is why we're partnering with ERP, is because they already have the staff that have the expertise. I mean, I don't have that expertise. Tom doesn't. We don't have the staff to do that. Like, we don't want to. Yeah.
We have a follow-up question from Stacy. She said, we also have the river corridor easement grant process. Are we able to put the projects that fit the river corridor easement criteria and not be able to be funded, eligible to be in the list?
I'm going to have to read this question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So,
Hi, it's Stacy. Can I just?
Oh, are you, sorry, go ahead, speak up.
Sorry. So we're currently going to have a block grant for the river corridor easements at the end of May. If we receive more projects than we have funding for, but those projects, the extra projects still make sense to fund, are we able to just roll them into the WISPr program?
Yeah, so that's also the concept that we are working with ERP over the next couple of months, is we are going to be encouraging all kind of natural resource projects that want funding. We are encouraging them to apply, and because WISPr has funding for planning and design, and so does ERP, and ERP has money for implementation, and potentially WISPr does too. So really what we're encouraging, we are encouraging to be able to see the world of projects that could get funded, and then we will find funding sources for them. And this is also potentially where interim financing comes in. So if some of these are large projects that maybe ERP can't fund the whole thing, WISPr can't fund the whole thing. We do interim financing, and over the next couple of years, between WISPr and ERP and all the other ridiculous number of funding sources out there, like dizzying number of funding sources, we can pay off that interim financing.
Could I just suggest that when WISPr and ERP are sort of working on these, which I think is great, you could maybe include the nonprofits in that conversation to some degree, because we're the ones who are going to have to work through the process, and we would be happy to sit at the table and say, oh, this is with questions and things like that, because I think we love this program. I can speak for the River Conservancy. But we also know that sometimes there's nuances in how timing of things and stuff like that. So just if that's possible.
You mean when WISPr and ERP get together to kind of like merge our...
Yeah, like for instance, what is eligible? When some of these, because we don't know in our world exactly what's happening in the ERP grant rounds 6 months from now, just because we know they change at some point. So we understood that the WISPr eligibility scope might be somewhat broader than some of the Clean Water Fund scope because of the requirement to tie clean water funding so closely to impaired waters or to nutrient reduction amounts. And that's great. We understand that. But there's a lot of other water quality benefits that can accrue from, I think. So that's, I guess, the question.
Yeah, and this has certainly come up in early conversations with WISPr and ERP is how do we address that? Because certainly much of CWIP, the Clean Water
Initiative Program.
I should know this. I just hear it as CWIP or QUIP. I was like, QUIP, is that the same as CWIP? And so all the acronyms we're throwing out, there's going to be a quiz at the end, is to how do we address the seemingly primary function of CWIP is to address TMDL, whereas WISPr, it's just like, well, any kind of water quality benefit is good water quality benefit. So yes, that is something that we're aware of it, and we know we need to kind of figure that, navigate that river.
Okay. Great. So just don't be afraid to ask for help from our end of things.
So another question online from Amy. Do you think that the ERP review staffing will be enhanced in any way to manage these additional projects coming into the review process, as well as to communicate clearly with partners about the few but new cross-cutter requirements?
Certainly, because we're, okay, you have a two-part question, and I want to make sure I'm not like a vague politician on this. I would expect that we would make sure that we're not overwhelming ERP technical staff. Like, that is not what we want to do. We do not want to make this more work on technical staff. So that is certainly part of our purview, is to say, how can we maybe streamline review a little bit more? I'm making up words right now. We haven't actually sat down to figure out what's happening. And then your second question, part of what's going to happen over the next couple of months is maybe making an update to the CWIP application to ensure that we include some of the required federal cross-cutters, or at least check boxes to make sure that project could be eligible for WISPr in the event that ERP doesn't, that it's a better match under WISPr. Is there any other question? That's it? Did I answer that? Was that, yeah?
That answered okay? I think so.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any additional questions for Ashley? Oh, just type.
I'm Sarita Austin. I'm a representative, and I hope I'm not ever vague. I do my best to a lot of details and taking.
Sure.
But I'm also on the Colchester Planning Commission, and as you know, this vote went down in the septic, and I'm devastated by that vote. And
you're not the only one.
And I didn't, when you said this, I'm assuming that these grants don't apply to wastewater. Well, I know we had some money available to us, and I'm just curious about will we still have that money? Is it gone now? Do we have to I mean, I'm sure Brian Osborne.
So,
will.
first off, these aren't grants. And I'm going to let, so I'll answer questions about kind of how we could, so Tom would be the person to answer the grant question about, and I'm going to table that till probably after the meeting.
Okay.
Because that's not this, but in terms of, so had Colchester's bond passed, and when Colchester's bond passes in the future, let's just play in a world of hypotheticals here. Let's be optimistic and hypothetical, because we can do that when we're talking about potentials. So when Colchester's bond passes, and when they apply for a loan through the Clean Water SRF, 10% of that loan can be used to sponsor only a natural resource project. And I've already spoken with a couple of people from Colchester, Jeff and the woman who's in charge of the rec department, blanking on her name.
I know Greg Calcutta is in charge, but Sarah had. No, it's all right.
But we've talked about, because they're like, we have a bunch of projects that would certainly fit underneath this natural resource world that we would love to then use our 10% to actually sponsor our own projects. And we're like, great. Like, there's nothing wrong with a municipality taking care of projects that are on their own radar, as long as it falls under the ERP umbrella. It still has to go through ERP vetting, so it would still have to apply to ERP for the vetting, even though we know that we would likely pair them with it and under WISPr. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let you talk with Tom after about the grants.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to run, but I'm sure people are talking to you from Colchester. Thank you.
So we and other nonprofits submitted a number of ranking projects in the last round.
Yep.
Are those, what happens to those now?
So a number of those are actually already in ERP because they actually got preliminary design funding through ERP. So they are already kind of vetted.
Yeah.
The ones that aren't, so it's a two-part thing. One, we don't have any municipalities that have been like, yeah, we're going to sign up. That's something Tom and I need to do outreach on. So all is not lost. We haven't missed anything because we don't have anybody to participate. But I would say the projects that have already received ERP vetting are good to go. The ones that haven't should apply the next round. Okay?
Actually, at what point are you, from when or at what point did you start asking municipalities to enroll in WISPr? So is that part of the application, SRF application?
Yeah. Yep. So the current year, the list that we've drafted this year, the applications that we got for the list this year have a question like, are you interested in participating in WISPr?
Okay.
And so we can take those projects, those communities, and do outreach to them. But we're hoping that, I don't expect it to be next year or the year after, but we're hoping that it just becomes part of the paradigm, that like every municipality just gets a loan for 110% and we pair them with a sponsored project and it just happens. Now, the benefit is that just like with our regular loan program, if a community takes out a loan for $1 million and only spends $900,000, they only pay back $900,000. So if we provide a loan to a municipality who says they're interested in sponsoring but then doesn't end up sponsoring, they're not on the hook for that 110% of the loan. They're only on the hook for the amount that was dispersed under that loan. So this is also why we're hoping that by doing its own loan program for under our private underwriters, which is the Vermont Economic Development Authority, that it'll really truly take the burden off the municipalities, and it'll be a no-brainer for them to participate. But we need to get the word out to municipalities that, because again, this all came together probably within the last month. This change, so.
You have another question and comment online. Stacy Pomeroy asked, can we get a list of the projects that are already in the WISPr list? And Dan Albrecht said, yes, a list would be good. I've pushed out notices to Chittenden county towns, but I'm curious if anybody is trying to get a project off the ground.
So again, because the list of, essentially what I would have to do is I would have to get the list of ERP eligible projects, which I'm sure you guys have a very good spreadsheet that has them.
So are you referring to the projects, the applications that were received during this last round?
Yeah. Or even ones that you received that, like, basically the world of projects that are designed, that are.
We have applications.
Yeah. So yes, we can. We do have our website that I've been derelict in updating just because there's been so many changes. But I think after ERP meets next week to do their technical review meeting on the projects, I'll have a better sense of which ones are actually going to go to the next step, and then I can meld those lists together. I can make that more visible to the public.
Great. So, Ashley, for those who want to get more information, would you suggest they go to the public hearing on the 1st, or are there other no?
Actually, Tom and I were talking about this morning.
Okay.
The meeting on the 1st is going to be a lot of jargon. There are going to be far more acronyms thrown out, and it's going to be really kind of it's going to be more technical. And Tom and I feel like it's more of the engineering firms that work on behalf of our municipalities. That's really the focus. If you want more information about WISPr, I would say just contact me. I am happy to meet with you one-on-one or at an RPC. If you want me to do a similar presentation, I can do that.
Yeah, I would say too, as things evolve and we make some key decisions around how to align the two programs, we can certainly hold another session like this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do it on Skype and here in Montpelier or elsewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. And I think a useful thing to think about WISPr is it's another tool in the box. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're really trying to help support the work that's already happening.
We have one more question online. Steve, did you have the question? Two more questions, then we'll wrap up. So Stacy asked, do the $10 million interim funds for the nonprofit have to be sponsored by a municipality, or can they be done without municipal support?
No, yes.
Okay. Everybody get that.
Last question?
I guess just so I understand this kind of interim period of the collaboration between WISPr and ERP. So if we have projects that we think would be great WISPr projects, the way I understand it right now, if we haven't already submitted those to the WISPr ranking, we need to wait until the September ERP grant then?
Yeah, I guess the question, the way it's set up, you can submit applications anytime.
Okay.
The next review date is going to be likely in September. And I guess one open-ended question is how our materials might be changing in order to accommodate this broader scope that WISPr allows us to address. So I think it is probably prudent not to wait on submitting an application.
All right, I would like to argue the other way.
Okay.
To say if we could start to pre-vet these projects with the watershed coordinators, can we start to at least know whether a particular project that we believe would be a good WISPr project, because that's a big blank period of time for us to be project.
Absolutely.
To have no idea.
We have a lot of internal training to do on exactly what that scope is. So if you were to go to one of our tactical basin planners right now and ask them, okay, what's WISPr eligible, I don't think they would necessarily be able to. And Ashley, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I guess I want to get a clarifier with you, Steve. Is when you say a good WISPr candidate, what do you think? Why WISPr and not ERP, or not just
Because the WISP. Well, I guess I may be still a little bit behind you guys on the evolutions, because the WISPr concept, from our point of view, was broader in the scope of projects that could be brought in. That they weren't
Because of this TMDL thing, is that
Yeah.
is that what your
Yeah.
concern is? Okay. Okay.
And there's all of these great projects that have already been kind of like they're on in the technical basin plans or they're in the
watershed project
database. And if I could go into those right now and pluck off 6 projects that I thought would be great, we could bundle those under a WISPr project, as opposed to applying for all 6 of those as separate ERP projects. There's huge efficiencies from our end, and or at least to know that these projects are, the type of ones that would be eligible for. And I know I'm kind of being vague, but we're responding to kind of like vague processes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to add, though, that the projects in the database have not necessarily been vetted.
Correct.
You can just call up and say, I want to add my project, and a basin planner can help you get your project in the list so that you can apply, so that it will be vetted.
Yeah.
But just being in the database doesn't mean it's vetted.
Oh, see, that's a misconception out there.
Oh.
Yeah. So getting on.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be. This is my understanding. Is you have to be on the list in order to apply to ERP
Correct.
to get vetted. So being on the list doesn't automatically qualify you for any of these funding programs, just so we're clear.
So, okay, that's really good to know because that's not.
I didn't
That was sort of like the list seemed like.
Maybe I should add that to my presentation.
Anything that happened to get on the list. I mean,
That
so
was
good to
the
know.
original idea. It
Yeah.
was going to be a goal list, meaning if you're on the list, you can go.
Right.
But that didn't transpire. So it's a list in preparation for the grant.
Okay, good to know that.
So Steve, but to kind of on your further point of like, well, we want these evaluated and maybe we don't want to wait till September. How do we do that? And I would say that right now, I don't know, and I don't know if we are going to evaluate them off cycle. So that's the challenge because it just takes so much staff time,
Sure.
And we don't want 100, and I'm exaggerating here, but 100 off-list applications to come in, and then we just don't have any predictability. So this is something we WISPr need to work out with ERP, but we want to be sensitive to their workloads, and I think by encouraging more projects to apply, we already need to be sensitive to their workload, and so I certainly don't want to be doing a lot of off cycle unless, and I'm just like, again, this is just an idea, unless there is a very time sensitive project, like landowner died, their kids are like, you have 30 days to make a decision on whether you want to purchase this easement, and it hasn't been vetted, and it needs to be vetted in order to be interim financing eligible or some other tool eligible. That is, and I'm, again, this is just off the top of my head. So,
I hear all that, and I think those are all, I understand all that, and I guess if there's a way that, if the process could somehow, I don't know if pre-vetting is the right word or whatever, that we could bring in projects to the basin planners and say, does this even is this even going to be considered? Somehow so that in this universe of a lot of good projects in our view out there that could be taken on, it's be helpful.
In essence, sort of like a pre-proposal.
Exactly, like VACB does this with their funding suit they have. And I don't want to make more work, but I'm just trying to tell you guys that from our perspective, we could maybe make your work a lot easier when it comes to the actual application if we've checked off a bunch of the boxes already.
We are actually overtime, so we should end the clean water lecture. Tom, can you?
Just a real quick comment. I don't know in ERP if you guys are going to put together your guidance for vetting these projects. Is that a public document that consultants can use to see what we're going to be using in the program? As that might be something that might help you, Steve, is if you saw what we're going to use here in DEC to vet vet the project, you would probably get a pretty good idea for most of them where it would fall.
Okay, so we have to end this. Sorry.
Yeah.
We could continue after, but I just wanted to let everyone know that the recording and presentation, they're going to be online. I will send out the survey, and next month's lecture is a stormwater update, what you need to know about the new 3-acre general permit, May 9th in the Winooski room. For anyone that has questions, you can email Ashley, and you can continue to stay after and talk if you'd like. But thank you for coming, and we hope to see you next month.